Terminator Genisys may be terrible, it may be so self-referential it hurts, but that doesn't mean it isn't worth a watch. The series, while cheesy as hell, has finally returned to its roots, and so as you'd expect, there's a lot of Easter eggs and references hiding throughout its latest installment. I'm Sam from Whatculture.com, and this is a rundown of every Easter egg in Terminator Genisys. Spoilers, obviously. The opening voiceover states that Judgment Day occurred on August 29th, 1997, which is the date outlined for the event in Terminator 2, which I guess means they vetoed film 3 and 4. John's referred to as a prophet by Kyle Reese in the opening, which is a nod to Salvation, in which he's accused of being a false prophet by Resistance leaders. To be more in line with his original appearance in Terminator 2, John refers to his mother as Sarah because being edgy by using your mother's first name instead of calling her Mum. The first act of the film pays incredible attention to detail to the original, with everything down to camera angles and movement being identical to how it was in the first film in 1984. When good Arnie fights bad Arnie in the opening act, Sarah helps him win by sniping the bad one in the chest. Good Arnie turns and gives the thumbs up, a nod to the final moments of T2, in which the Terminator gives an emotional John and Sarah the thumbs up as he commits larvicide. This one took a hell of a lot of work on the production team's behalf, as Nike no longer make Vandals. With enough convincing though, they agreed to make a limited run for the shoot so that we could see a direct reference to the first film in Kyle Reese's store escape. And the first big dumb reference...
Come with me if you want to live!
Arnie trying to smile but coming off like a mentalist returns, frequently. When the team flee the T-1000, their van slams around a corner into a very familiar looking car, the DeLorean, a clear nod to Back to the Future. Robert Patrick was unable to participate in the shooting of the film because of the physical demands of the role of the T-1000, so Byung-Hun Lee's T-1000 has to mimic the original extra hard just to make up for it. Literally everything about Genisys' T-1000 is identical to the T2 original, right down to the movements and facial expressions we see it make throughout the film. Patrick does get a sly uncredited cameo in the hospital fight sequence though, where he plays a patiently waiting civilian. Kind of ironic considering the reason he couldn't be the T-1000 this time was medical. During a fight sequence, the T-1000 uses a drop of its liquid metal to repower a Terminator T-800 unit. This is a direct nod to Terminator 3, in which the TX is able to repower machinery with the touch of a finger. CG is very expensive, so when CG Arnie turned up in Salvation, it made sense that John burned its skin off straight away, so he was just fighting a robot. The same thing happens in this one. During the fight scene I mentioned before, Reese fires an explosive at the T-800, turning it into a nice and cheap metal skeleton. People forget that Terminator isn't just a movie franchise. The Sarah Connor Chronicles ran for 2 seasons, and while it did seriously crap on any idea of a coherent timeline, the creators of Genisys still felt it deserved a nod. And so when Kyle and Sarah appear on the highway in 2017, it's a direct reference to John and Sarah appearing on the highway in the show's pilot. Arnie's Terminator, Pops, rocks up to the lake after Sarah's parents are killed, and Sarah just ups and walks off with the weird silent guy holding the rocket launcher. Sensible. But he has the exact same look as his T1 counterpart, right down to the vintage gargoyle sunglasses. T2 is full of Pepsi, it's literally everywhere, so as a subtle nod, and no doubt with a hefty check in pocket because of it, a Pepsi vending machine appears prominently in the John is a Terminator reveal and the fight sequence that follows. Genisys sounds an awful lot like an amalgamation of the words genetic and system, which sums John up perfectly in this film. Also, you know, the Bible and all that. Detective O'Brien is actually one of the film's saving graces, but after the arrival of Kyle Reese, he hit the bottle and people thought he was nuts, because who the hell thinks killer robots actually exist? Because of this, when we get to 2017, his cop buddies mockingly refer to him as Optimus Prime. Miles Dyson makes a cameo, walking and talking with John Connor and his son Danny Dyson about Genisys, except neither he or Danny are played by the original actors. In fact, none of these 3 are the characters' original performers. In typical Terminator fashion, they gave away the plot twist in the second trailer, but John being a Terminator isn't that new an idea. In fact, an alternate ending to Terminator Salvation saw John killed and his flesh applied to Marcus's endoskeleton in order to keep John's legacy alive. Then Robo-John goes a bit psycho and kills all his friends. The machines win. Stunned silence. In Terminator 3, the TX gets lobbed into a particle accelerator and it wreaks havoc on its mechanical structure. There's a nod to this in Genisys when Terminator John gets thrown into a room with an MRI machine. He's pulled layer from layer, just like the TX. Terminator 2 had that big cheesy "I now know why you cry" line about the Terminator finally coming to terms with emotions but never being able to display them itself. Well, as John's pinned to the MRI machine I just mentioned, a solitary tear rolls down his cheek. Terminators can cry now. Brilliant. The end of Terminator 1 sees Sarah ride off into the desert after a gas station attendant tells her there's a storm coming in. In one of Genisys' quieter moments, Kyle tells Sarah about a coming storm, a definite nod to the end of the first film. This one is a bit of a trip, so bear with me. The boombox is a nice little reference that bridges a few films. First seen in Terminator 2 with John's friend Tim, John uses a similar boombox in Salvation to blast Guns N' Roses. This is getting quite meta. The Guns N' Roses track You Could Be Mine was originally the Ramones' I Wanna Be Sedated in the Terminator 2 script. So when we see Sarah with a similar boombox in Genisys and it's blasting I Wanna Be Sedated, we've got a kinda multi-layered Kinder Easter egg going on here. One of the fancier shots from T2 sees the T-1000 emerging from an explosion, all mechanical and chromey-like. This is directly mimicked when John emerges from the fire after an explosion at the crew's hideout in Genisys. Every single Terminator film has had Arnie tell someone to get out or off their vehicle. The running joke returns in Genisys as Arnie smashes headfirst into a police car during the Golden Gate Bridge chase. The bus flip looks awful familiar, doesn't it? It's because they did the exact same thing in 3 with the construction crane. Granted, it didn't look anywhere near as spectacular. And the other big dumb reference.
I'll be back.
What?
During the final fight scene with John, the T-800 has its arm ripped off, just like in Terminator 2. The arm isn't retrieved at the end of the film either, meaning it's a loose plot line and can show back up to be reverse engineered, just like we see in Terminator 2. One of the big set pieces of Terminator 2 is the bike chase sequence, and in it we see John is pretty gifted with a motorbike. He must get it from his father, as we see a young Kyle Reese tending to his motorbike at his parents' house in Genisys. And then of course, like every other damn film these days, there's a post-credits sequence in which we see the ruins of Cyberdyne and it's revealed that Genisys' core is still active. Matt Smith's Skynet avatar flickers to life and looks into the computer as we cut to black. Sequel.